Hey everyone, welcome back to Pages of the Globe. Today I'm going to be reading to you the short story called The Shawl by Cynthia Ozick. Now, this short story is probably one of the most notable works from her, and it's basically about this girl, or this woman, named Rosa. And she has a baby named Magda, who she's trying to give away because this story is set during the Holocaust, and her niece are going to a concentration camp. And Rosa wants to give away Magda so Magda will have a better life. But she is too afraid to do that because she's afraid that if she steps out of line, then the Nazi soldiers will kill her. And so when they arrive at the camp, she has to continue hiding Magda with her shawl, which is very important in the story because it hides Magda and keeps her quiet, so the other soldiers don't figure out about her. Now, one of the main themes in this story is definitely conflict, because Rosa is conflicted as she's walking towards the camp, because she wants to hand Magda to someone, but as I said before, she can't do that since the Nazi soldiers will shoot her. And also, she doesn't know what the stranger that she hands Magda to will do to her baby. When Rosa reaches the camp, she also notes how in the end Magda will end up dying as there's not enough food for her. And so she doesn't really know what to do because she wants to keep her alive, but she doesn't know how. So there are so many conflicts in this, and it's really just like, if you do this, then you have to have this. And it's constant consequence game. Ozick also gives us an insight into the struggles that many Jewish people had when they were sent to the camps, because they had no food, no shelter, and they didn't really know if they were to survive what was going to happen to them. Now, I don't want to tell you exactly what happens in the story, so I'm going to tell you a couple facts about the author. Now, Cynthia was born on April 17th, 1928. She is an American short story writer, novelist, and essayist. She attended Hunter College High School in Manhattan. She earned her BA from New York University and went on to study at Ohio State University, where she completed an MA in English Literature, following the novels of Henry James. Ozick's fiction and essays are often about Jewish American life, but she also writes about politics, history, and literature criticism. In addition, she has also written and translated poetry. The novelist David Foster Wallace called Ozick one of the greatest living American writers. She has been described as the Athena of America's literary pantheon and the Emily Dickinson of the Bronx, and one of the most accomplished and graceful literary stylists of her time. 3 of her short stories have won first prize in the O. Henry competition, which is a very prestigious one, and she has also been nominated for the Man Booker Award, which is probably like one of the most prestigious awards, and it's up there with the Nobel Prize and the Pulitzer Award. She has written a total of 7 novels, 7 short stories, 9 essay collections, and 1 drama. The Shawl itself was published on March 26, 1980, and as I said before, this is probably one of her most notable works, and you can find it on New Yorker, you can find it basically everywhere. And I would say this is probably the short story that really brought her up to fame. Without further ado, let's get on to the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like to hear next. The Shawl by Cynthia Ozick. Stella, cold, cold, the coldness of hell. How they walked on the roads together, Rosa with Magda curled up between sore breasts, Magda wound up in the shawl. Sometimes Stella carried Magda, but she was jealous of Magda. A thin girl of 14, too small, with twin breasts of her own. Stella wanted to be wrapped in a shawl, hidden away, asleep, rocked by the march, a baby, a round infant in arms. Magda took Rosa's nipple, and Rosa never stopped walking, a walking cradle. There was not enough milk. Sometimes Magda sucked air. Then she screamed. Stella was ravenous. Her knees were tumors on sticks, her elbows chicken bones. Rosa did not feel hunger. She felt light, not like someone walking, but like someone in faint, in a trance, arrested in a fit, somebody who was already a floating angel. Someone who is already a floating angel, alert and seeing everything, but in the air, not there, not touching the road, as if teetering on the tips of her fingernails. She looked into Magda's face through a gap in the shawl. A squirrel in a nest, safe. No one could reach her inside the little house of shawl windings. The face, very round, a pocket mirror of a face. But it was not Rosa's bleak complexion, dark like chlorella. It was dark like cholera. It was another kind of face altogether. Eyes blue as air, smooth feathers of hair, nearly as yellow as the star sewn into Rosa's coat. You could think she was one of their babies. Rosa, floating, dreamed of giving Magda away in one of the villages. She could leave the line for a minute and push Magda into the hands of any woman on the side of the road. But if she moved out of line, they might shoot. And if she fled the line for half a second and pushed the shawl bundle at a stranger, would the woman take it? She might be surprised or afraid. She might drop the shawl and Magda would fall out and strike her head and die. The little round head. Such a good child. She gave up screaming and now sucked only for the taste of the dry nibble itself. The neat grip of the tiny gums. One mite of a tooth tip sticking out in the bottom gun. How shiny an elfin tombstone of white marble gleaming there. Without complaining, Magda relinquished Rosa's teeth, first to the left, then to the right. Both were cracked, not a sniff of milk. The duct's crevice extinct, a dead volcano, blind eye, chill hole. So Magda took the corner of the shawl and milked it instead. She sucked and sucked, flooding the threads with wetness. The shawl's good flavor, milk of linen. It was a magic shawl. It could nourish an infant for 3 days and 3 nights. Magda did not die. She stayed alive, although very quiet. A peculiar smell of cinnamon and almonds lifted out of her mouth. She held her eyes open every moment, forgetting how to blink or nap, and Rosa and sometimes Stella studied their blueness. On the road, they raised one burden of a leg after another and studied Magda's face. Arion, Stella said in a voice grown as thin as a string. And Rosa thought how Stella had gazed at Magda like a young cannibal. And the time that Stella said Arion, it sounded to Rosa as if Stella had really said, "Let us devour her." But Magda lived to walk. She lived that long, but she did not walk very well, partly because she was only 15 months old, and partly because the spindles of her legs could not hold up her fat belly. It was fat with air, full and round. Rosa gave almost all her food to Magda. Stella gave nothing. Stella was ravenous, a growing child herself, but not growing much. Stella did not menstruate. Rosa did not menstruate. Rosa was also ravenous, but also not. She learned from Magda how to drink the taste of finger in one's mouth. They were in a place without pity. All pity was annihilated in Rosa. She looked at Stella's bones without pity. She was sure that Stella was waiting for Magda to die so she could put her teeth into the little thighs. Rosa knew Magda was going to die very soon. She should have been dead already, but she had been buried away deep inside the magic shawl, mistaken there for the shivering mound of Rosa's breasts. Rosa clung to the shawl as if it covered only herself. No one took it away from her. Magda was mute. She never cried. Rosa hid her in the barracks, under the shawl, but she knew that one day someone would inform, or one day someone, not even Stella, would steal Magda to eat her. When Magda began to walk, Rosa knew Magda was going to die very soon. Something would happen. She was afraid to fall asleep. She slept with the weight of her thigh on Magda's body. She was afraid she would smother Magda under her thigh. The weight of Rosa was becoming less and less. Rosa and Stella were slowly turning into air. Magda was quiet, but her eyes were horribly alive, like blue tigers. She watched. Sometimes she laughed. It seemed like laugh, but how could it be? Magda had never seen anybody laugh. Still, Magda laughed at her shawl when the wind blew in its corners.
When the wind blew its corners.
Still, Magda laughed at her shawl when the wind blew its corners. Bad wind with pieces of black in it that made Stella's and Rosa's eyes tear. Magda's eyes were always clear and tearless. She watched like a tiger. She guarded her shawl. No one could touch it. Only Rosa could touch it. Stella was not allowed. The shawl was Magda's own baby, her pet, her little sister. She tangled herself up in it and sucked on one of the corners, but she wanted to be very still. Then Stella took the shawl away and made Magda die. Afterwards, Stella said, I was cold. Afterwards, she was always cold, always. The cold went into her heart. Rosa saw that Stella's heart was cold. Magda flopped onward with her little pencil legs, scribbling this way and that in search of the shawl. The pencils faltered at the barracks opening when the light began. Rosa saw and pursued, but Magda was already in the square outside the barracks in the jolly light. It was the roll call arena. Every morning, Rosa had to conceal Magda under the shawl against a wall of the barracks and go out and stand in the arena with Stella and hundreds of others, sometimes for hours. And Magda, deserted, was quiet under the shawl, sucking on her corner. Every day Magda was quiet, so she did not die. Rosa saw that today Magda was going to die, and at the same time a fearful joy ran in Rosa's two palms. Her fingers were on fire. She was astonished, febrile. Magda, in the sunlight, swaying her pencil legs, was howling.
Magda in the sunlight, swaying on
her pencil legs, was howling. Ever since the drying up of Rosa's nipples, ever since Magda's last scream on the road, Magda had been devoid of any syllable. Magda was mute. Rosa believed that something had gone wrong with her vocal cords, with her windpipe, and the cave of her larynx. Magda was
larynx.
With her windpipe, with the cave of her larynx. Magda was defective, without a voice. Perhaps she was deaf. There might be something amiss with her intelligence. Magda was dumb. Even the laugh that came out of the ash-trippled wind made a clown out of Magda's shawl was the only air blowing. Even the laugh that came when the ash-trippled wind made a clown out of Magda's shawl was the only air blown, showing her teeth. Even when the lice, head lice and body lice, crazed her so that she became as wild as one of the big rats that plundered the barracks at daybreak looking for carrion, she rubbed, scratched, and kicked a bit and rolled around without a whimper. But now, Magda's mouth was spilling a long, vicious rope of clamor. Ma! It was the first noise Magda had ever sent out from her throat since the drying of Rosa's nipples. Ma! Again, Magda was wavering in the peerless sunlight of the arena, scribbling on such pitiful little bent shins. Rosa saw. She saw that Magda was grieving for the loss of her shawl. She saw that Magda was going to die. A tide of commands hammered into Rosa's nipples. Fetch, get, bring. But she did not know which to go after first, Magda or the shawl. If she jumped into the arena to snatch Magda up, the howling would not stop because Magda would still have not had the shawl. But if she ran back into the barracks to find the shawl, and if she found it, and if she came after